we're gonna make a mutation video on Blue TV. So would you like to tell us about yourself?
Okay, yes. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I'm assistant professor at Aalto University for biochemistry, and I'm teaching an introductory course in fundamentals of biosciences. That's why I know.
Yes, we are your lucky students. I'll go directly to the topic. It's gonna be a bit basic. What is a mutation?
So a mutation is a change in the genome of an organism or a virus. So maybe one has to know that in biology the information is stored in the genome. So usually this is made of DNA. And then when an organism grows or reproduces, it needs to copy the genome. And then it's important that the copy is the same, otherwise it wouldn't be a copy. But then if it's not an exact copy, then we call that a mutation. So it means mutation means change actually. So,
okay. So how does it happen?
Well, so there are different ways how this can occur. So there is sort of like an intrinsic error rate, because not even nature is perfect. So when you copy this DNA, then sometimes an error occurs. And so there is like some intrinsic rate how this error can occur, and then the biology has different systems to correct these mistakes, but it's not always corrected, and so then we have a mutation. So it sort of happens naturally, but then there's like certain things that promote this mutation. For example, if you have too much sunlight, then this can damage the DNA, and then this can lead to increased
So, like,
mutation.
For example, can we call these mutations as all the time bad mutations, or like there is some of them are good or healthy for the human?
I would say that it's very rare that the mutation is good, because we are basically the result of evolution. So evolution actually is sort of based on mutation, so that the species can, over many generations, change a bit. It needs these mutations. But basically I would say we are quite optimized. And so if a mutation occurs, it's a change. So usually every change is bad. So or if we were perfect, which we aren't, then every change would be bad. Okay. But it's an interesting point, because I mean we are not perfect.
You're not perfect.
And so there could be cases where a mutation would make the organism actually better. So maybe we could have some examples.
So, is there any kind of a theory the mutation helps the evaluation, or is it just like you said, we are not perfect, but the mutations are happening? So is it some kind of a part of the evolution, or always we are trying to protect our base genome?
No. I mean, so mutations are a necessary part of evolution. So evolution has three different requirements for evolution. So first it's reproduction. So you need to grow. This is anyway what biology needs to do. So you need to produce more. And then mutations need to occur. So when you have a lot of something, you need to have a variation. Because if everything is the same, then everything would stay the same. So it's sort of natural that it cannot be evolution if it's always the same. So mutations are needed. And then the third requirement for evolution is then the selection. And then usually the mutations are bad, so they're selected away. So if, let's say, if you have a child and that has a genetic disease, then it's likely that this child will have, for example, die before it produces offsprings. So there is sort of, usually they are bad, but then there's examples where the mutation can be beneficial. There's in the textbook is always this giraffes, if a mutation makes the neck longer, then maybe this giraffe would have an advantage, and then it would have a better fitness and then more offspring, and then this mutation would be beneficial. But it has to be said that apparently the giraffes don't have the long necks to reach for the food in the trees. There's other reasons. Now we're drifting off. So sometimes there are beneficial mutations.
Okay,
and they are needed for evolution.
There is a certain difference between modification and mutation. Having muscular body, so it's not going to be a mutation. It's not going to change our DNA. It's just going to change our body.
Yes, of course. So this is also not inheritable. So if you go to the gym all the time, your kids will not have a lot of muscles when they're born. So that's why it really needs this mutation, so to pass it to the offspring. But I mean, humans are more difficult because we are a mixture of the DNA from our fathers and mothers. So I was now more relying to, let's say, a microbe or so, where it's just dividing and not mixing different genomes.
I have a question. So, like, for example, I want to make my child muscular or like more intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible by the mutations, not modifications. So my question is, can we make some intentional mutations? Can we change the human DNA or like any kind of a DNA and make intentional mutations and make offsprings?
Well, in theory, this is possible. I mean, you can change the DNA of organisms. So for microbes, this is very common, and we do that in my research group a lot. But then for example, for humans, it was about 4 years ago that for the first time the genome of a human being has been modified. And I'm actually very surprised that this was not more in the news. It's actually, sometimes people don't even know about that, but it's now already 4 years ago. And so for this, of course, you need then to edit it in the egg cell so that the mutation is then going to the whole organism.
Okay, so like in a way it is possible to make like some supernatural humans, like Hulk or Wolverine.
I don't know. Well, then depends what you think is like superior. Like if you probably optimize one trait, then maybe another trait would be compromised. And then the other point is that nature is already quite evolved. So we are not perfect, but we are quite optimized, I would say. That's why it's probably difficult to make something totally new. Mm-hmm. And then it's also quite difficult because we don't know the function of each of the genes. And so probably to make this superhuman, you would need to edit many different genes and possibly at the same time. And then there's also all these ethical concerns about changing the genome of a human being, even if you do that for animals. Luckily for microbes, nobody cares too much. We genetically modify them.
Yeah, if it's industrialized, so if we can make more money from the microbes or from the like edited,
Yes.
genetically modified plants.
Yes, I mean, this is then controversial. I mean, also people then fear that maybe these plants will take over. So this is a bit controversial, but let's say just microbes that are in a bioreactor, then nowadays there's quite a big agreement that this is okay to do, and there we take care to sterilize and kill all the microbes. So researchers need to make sure all the genetically modified microbes are killed before they are released to nature.
We can have a small break.
Okay.
Just
5 minutes later.
Can microwave ovens or cell phones give us mutations and we can get cancer? Is it possible, or how does it work? Should we be afraid of it?
I would say you should not be afraid of it. So I mean, maybe I need to go back to the mutation. So what I have been discussing was sort of the natural error rate, so that there are mistakes occurring. But then, for example, with sunlight or with certain type of radiation, you can induce these mutations. But so microwave frequency is not strong enough to give these mutations because it's non-ionizing radiation, so it doesn't have the potential to produce radicals, so to really interfere with the chemicals. I mean, what the microwave is doing, it's basically inducing rotations and then warming up compounds. So I would not fear direct influence, but maybe there's some indirect influences. So if you stick your head into the microwave and switch it on, then maybe you heat up your cells, and maybe this can cause mutations. Or then it's also, if you heat unhealthy food, then your body is less ready to fight oxidative stress. So if you make a search, it might be theoretically possible that you could even find the correlation. If you assume that microwave food is less healthy than non-microwave food. So you may theoretically find the correlation, but I don't think that the microwave itself can
we need to push the limits to get cancer from microwave.
Yes.
I had an interesting question about genetic mutation, genetic engineering in general in plants. Mm-hmm. We've genetically engineered many plant species to be more resistant to infections and disease. Do you
Yeah.
think that one day that might be possible in humans?
Superhumans.
I mean, this is already now possible. So if I remember correctly, this genetic mutation in the human was a deletion of a gene that is needed to get infected by HIV. So there is like, I forgot which gene it is, but some people who have a deletion in this gene, they cannot be infected by HIV. And if I remember correctly, so this person has deleted that gene. And so this genetically modified human being, which is now 4 years old, is probably then not able to be infected by HIV. I don't know the details, but this would basically be such an example. It will also protect from disease.
Yes, we will probably find on Google and put the link under the video or this
Yeah.
paper. I
Do you think it's going to be widespread, or do you think it's just going to be, one-off things here and there?
Are you now talking about the plants or the human?
Humans, yes.
Well, I think this is associated with a big ethical concern, and I myself really think that this should not be done. So this is like one reason why it's at least by the majority of people will not accept that, but you can never exclude certain people to do that. But I think it's quite a long-reaching goal to really have a beneficial effect, beneficial mutation.
Since we know that certain things can induce genetic mutations, and one of the most dangerous diseases that affects humans is cancer, which is developed from genetic mutations. Is there a way to kind of restrict cancer genes, since we understand that certain things induce and certain things might slow down the mutations?
So I have to say that cancer is extremely complicated. So there's many factors that needs to come together that it causes the cancer, and it's also not fully understood. So this is really depends on the case. I mean, the easiest case might be like skin cancer, which is caused by the sunlight. So then this is sort of the easiest way to prevent this not to go too much to the sun. And then possibly for certain types of cancer, if one identifies components that need to all come together, maybe one could remove one of these components.
Yeah, I also remember like from the lecture we were discussing about some skin, like the UV caused mutations on the skin.
Yes.
So it sounds like a kind of a vampire. Can you just elaborate that one a bit? How does it work?
So it works when two thymine nucleotides are attaching together with a chemical bond, and then this will induce errors in the DNA replication.
There's some people have this disease, so they can't go to the sunlight, so they have to live in a way in the night time.
Yes, this is like one very specific example. So we have a repair mechanism for this type of genetic defect, and if this repair mechanism is broken, then you are intolerant to light.
And the vampire story starts from the history. I don't know, it might be an option. There is our last question. We discussed about a lot of mutations and harmful effects of these kind of effects. So what we can do to minimize harmful mutations in our life, in our daily life?
Well, since most mutations are harmful, I would try to prevent mutations. And so this would mean, well, some mutations anyway happen, you cannot do anything, but there are some things that you can do. For example, avoid too much sun. But I think not going to the sun at all is also not good, so it's always sort of a bit a trade-off. And then, for example, there is chemicals that can induce mutations or cancer. So, for example, in smoke, there's
some people we are smoking in here.
So you should avoid that. And then in general, a healthy lifestyle helps to reduce oxygen stress. So oxygen is actually a quite aggressive molecule, even though we need it. And so then in several reactions, there are radicals being formed. And then if you have a more healthy lifestyle with antioxidants, you can make sure that you have at the end less of this oxidative damage. So in general, a healthy lifestyle would help. But I think the number one thing is to try to avoid the compounds from which we know that they cause cancer. So mostly number one is the smoking. And then comes like good food and less alcohol and so on would be my recommendation.
Just healthy life. Thank you for the interview. We are happy to have you in here. I hope we will see you again with us some different topics.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope you could learn something.
Thank you.